What's going on?
My husband, he went to go help me. My Jeep is stuck around the corner, and he's been shot in the head, please. He's around the corner.
Come here. Come here.
The guy took, I don't have it. He's on my phone. I don't have anything.
Come here. Have a seat. Have a seat. Have a seat. Stay in here. Stay here.
September 9, 2016, Royse City, Texas. Police vehicles move toward a remote dirt road surrounded by fields, deep tire ruts, and almost complete darkness. A frightened woman has just reported that her husband has been shot while trying to rescue her. When officers reach the vehicle, they find 47-year-old fire captain Robert Poynter sitting behind the steering wheel of his wife's Jeep. He has been struck in the head by a close-range shotgun blast. His wife, Chacey Poynter, is alive. She tells police she became stuck in the mud, called Robert for help, and watched as an unknown man emerged from the darkness and opened fire. At first, it sounds like a terrifying roadside ambush. But investigators immediately notice a problem. The Jeep is not actually stuck. Chacey has no convincing reason for driving onto an isolated road that local farmers mainly use to reach their fields. The gunman supposedly appeared without warning, killed Robert, and then allowed the only eyewitness to escape unharmed. And while officers are still processing the scene, Chacey begins talking about her damaged marriage, her extramarital relationships, and one particular man named Michael Garza. Within hours, the mysterious attacker would have a name. Within weeks, a shotgun linked to that man's family would be recovered from a field near the murder scene. And inside Chacey's phone, investigators would find conversations showing that Robert's disappearance had been discussed long before she called him for help. The roadside emergency was fake. The location was not accidental. And Robert Poynter had been brought into the darkness by the one person he still trusted enough to rescue. Before we reconstruct exactly how investigators expose the plan, subscribe to the channel. Every case here is built from court records, police interviews, digital evidence, and verified reporting, not rumors dressed up as facts. If you value detailed true crime investigations, hit the like button and tell us in the comments what city or country you are watching from. Your support allows us to keep digging through the records and bringing you complete case breakdowns. Now, let us return to the dirt road, because the first version Chacey gave police would not survive the night. At approximately 10:40 p.m., drivers near Farm to Market Road 35 and Hunt County Road 2595 noticed a woman trying to stop passing vehicles. The woman was Chacey Poynter. She appeared frantic, breathless, and desperate for someone to call for help. Royse City police were dispatched shortly afterward. Chacey told the first responding officers that her husband was inside a Jeep farther down the road. She said he had been shot in the head. The road itself immediately complicated the response. It was dark, narrow, and poorly maintained. Deep ruts ran through the dirt. Water and mud collected in sections of the path, and it was not the kind of place most drivers would enter by mistake. Officers continued toward the Jeep. Inside, they found Robert Poynter. He had come to the road after receiving a call from Chacey saying her vehicle was stuck. Robert had apparently parked his own truck farther away, walked toward the Jeep, and climbed into the driver's seat to move it. That was when the gunman fired. The shot struck Robert in the head at extremely close range. The position of the wound and the ammunition evidence would later support the conclusion that the attacker had moved close to the vehicle before pulling the trigger. This did not look like someone firing randomly from a distance. The killer had waited for Robert to sit exactly where he was found. Police began recording Chacey's account. She described a tall figure dressed in dark clothing. She could not clearly identify the attacker's race. She offered no obvious motive and initially acted as though she had no idea who would want Robert dead. According to her story, she had taken a wrong turn while traveling to meet Robert. The Jeep became stuck. She called him and he came to help. Then the stranger appeared. But as Sergeant Shane Meek listened, the account began producing more questions than answers. Why had Chacey driven down this road? Why had a gunman been waiting there? Why had he killed Robert but left her alive? Why was nothing apparently stolen? And most importantly, how could an unknown attacker have predicted that Robert would arrive at that precise location at that precise time? A random killer could not know Chacey would call her husband. A random killer could not know Robert would come alone. Someone had arranged the conditions of the encounter. Chacey began explaining that her marriage was in serious trouble. She said she no longer wanted to be with Robert. She claimed he was controlling and that he had threatened to take their daughter. Then she admitted she had been seeing another man. His name was Michael Garza. Investigators would soon learn that Garza was not the only man in Chacey's private life. She had been communicating with and meeting several men while her marriage deteriorated. Robert had become suspicious, and evidence of the affairs was becoming increasingly difficult to hide. That detail would later provide the prosecution with a possible motive. But at the roadside, officers had a more urgent question. Where was Michael Garza? Chacey admitted that she had visited him earlier that evening. She also admitted that their relationship was sexual. Think about what that meant. Chacey had left the home of a man with whom she was having an affair. She then drove onto a remote dirt road and called her husband to come help her. Minutes later, an armed man emerged from the darkness and shot Robert. The unknown stranger was becoming less mysterious with every answer. Sergeant Meek read Chacey her legal rights. She said she understood them and continued speaking. Police transported her to the Royse City Police Department, where Detective Michael Burke began a more detailed interview during the early morning hours. At first, Chacey stayed close to the same story. She had become stuck. Robert arrived. A dark figure appeared. She did not know the attacker. Detective Burke focused on the detail that made the least sense. The shooter had supposedly come close enough to fire a shotgun into the Jeep, yet he had made no serious effort to silence Chacey. If she were an innocent witness, she could identify his height, clothing, direction of travel, and possibly his voice. Why would a killer take that risk? The simplest explanation was that the shooter did not see Chacey as a witness. He saw her as part of the plan. For roughly 2 hours, Chacey resisted identifying anyone. Then Detective Burke asked again who had shot Robert. This time she answered. Mikey did. The stranger in the darkness now had a name. Michael Garza. But identifying Garza created another problem for Chacey. She now had to explain how he arrived at the road. Her account changed. Garza had not appeared by coincidence. He had traveled with her. He had directed her toward the area. Chacey claimed the original purpose was only to confront Robert and frighten him. She said Garza was supposed to make Robert understand what it felt like to be intimidated. Then another part of her original account collapsed. The Jeep had never been stuck. Chacey admitted that she had lied to Robert. She used the fake emergency to bring him to the road. The accidental wrong turn was no longer believable. The random gunman had disappeared from the story, and the woman who supposedly knew nothing about the attacker had now admitted transporting him toward the scene. Still, Chacey insisted on one distinction. She had helped arrange a confrontation, not a murder. According to her later version, Garza acted beyond what she had expected. She claimed Robert was supposed to be frightened or injured, but not killed. Investigators now had to determine whether this was the truth or simply the last defense available to her. To answer that, they needed to examine what happened before the night of September 9th. Robert Poynter had spent nearly 2 decades with the University Park Fire Department near Dallas. He rose to the rank of captain and had been named Firefighter of the Year in 2003. People who worked with him described someone dependable, calm, and protective. He was a father of 3 daughters and was known for putting his children at the center of his life. Robert had previously been married to his high school sweetheart, Amy. Their marriage lasted roughly 20 years before it began to break down. During that period, Robert met Chacey Tyler Mormon. Chacey was around 20 years old. Robert was almost 2 decades older. Their relationship developed quickly. Chacey became pregnant, and the couple married in December 2009. From the outside, they appeared to be building a new family. Inside the marriage, however, the relationship gradually became unstable. Chacey later claimed Robert was verbally and physically abusive. She said testosterone treatments affected his personality and made him aggressive. Robert's former wife, daughters, and friends strongly disputed those allegations. Investigators said they could not find independent evidence supporting the claims. That does not mean every private argument inside the home was documented. It means the prosecution treated Chacey's abuse narrative with suspicion, especially because she repeated it to men with whom she was developing relationships. It became part of a pattern. Chacey would describe herself as trapped. She would say Robert controlled her. She would suggest he might take their daughter. Then the man listening to her would be invited to imagine himself as the person who could save her. Over time, Chacey began communicating with multiple men. One of Robert's daughters discovered sexual messages on Chacey's computer. She also noticed Chacey leaving the house while Robert worked overnight shifts. Chacey sometimes claimed she was going to exercise, but her clothing and timing raised suspicion. Robert was eventually told about what had been found. He installed a security camera near the front door of the family home. 12 days before his murder, the camera recorded one of Chacey's lovers arriving at the property. Chacey noticed the camera and quickly moved outside, apparently trying to prevent the visit from being recorded. But the device had already captured enough. Robert now had visual evidence that the affairs were continuing. He began considering divorce more seriously. That decision threatened several parts of Chacey's life at once. The marriage could end. The family home could be sold. A custody battle could begin. And Robert's financial arrangements could change. He also had a life insurance policy worth approximately $680,000, with Chacey named as the primary beneficiary. Prosecutors would later argue that money helped explain why divorce was not enough for her. A living ex-husband could change beneficiaries, fight over property, and seek custody. A dead husband could not. However, an important legal distinction must be made. Chacey was indicted for capital murder under a theory involving financial remuneration, but the jury did not convict her of capital murder. Jurors instead found her guilty of the lesser offense of murder. That means the insurance policy was part of the prosecution's motive theory, but the jury did not find the special financial element required for capital murder beyond a reasonable doubt. The strongest evidence of Chacey's intent came not from the policy itself, but from her messages and actions. Michael Garza entered Chacey's life through Facebook. Their online communication developed into an affair. Chacey told him that Robert was abusive and controlling. Garza responded with increasing hostility toward a man he apparently did not personally know. While Robert and Chacey were on a vacation in Mexico, supposedly trying to repair their marriage, Chacey continued messaging Garza. The conversations became violent. Garza indicated that he was willing to shoot Robert. Chacey later claimed she did not take those threats seriously. But Garza was not the only man with whom Robert's disappearance was discussed. 8 days before the murder, Chacey sent a message expressing the hope that Robert might run out of air during a fire. In another conversation, she said she needed him gone. When one man answered that he was not a magician, Chacey replied that she needed one. In messages presented as evidence, she also referred to benefits and the fear of losing custody. Any one statement could potentially be dismissed as anger or exaggeration. The problem was the repetition. Robert being gone appeared again and again. The topic was discussed with different men, and one of those men was openly willing to use violence. Pay attention to the timing. Robert had confirmed at least one affair through the doorbell camera. The Mexico trip had failed to repair the marriage. He had spoken about leaving. Chacey's financial and custody situation appeared uncertain. Then she told Garza she had made up her mind. The following night, Robert was dead. Chacey's statements to police revealed that the planning went beyond hostile messages. She admitted Garza had discussed killing Robert in the weeks before the shooting. She said she saw weapons placed on a kitchen table. She knew Garza was loading firearms into his truck. According to the later appellate record, the original plan involved taking Robert into a more isolated part of Dallas and making the killing look like a robbery. Garza would shoot him, take his truck, and burn it. The plan then changed. Instead of Dallas, they traveled toward Hunt County Road 2595. Garza parked his own vehicle miles away. Chacey picked him up. He directed her toward the rural road and eventually got out of the Jeep. He then told her to continue down the road, position the Jeep, and call Robert. The fake emergency was not a spontaneous excuse created after the vehicle happened to become stuck. It was the mechanism used to deliver Robert to the shooter. Robert received the call from his wife. She said she needed help. Despite the affairs and the failing marriage, he responded. His own truck could not travel comfortably through the deepest sections of the road, so he parked farther away and approached on foot. Chacey met him. As they walked toward the Jeep, she noticed his cologne. It was the same fragrance he had worn on their wedding day. She made a comment about it. Robert laughed. That small detail is one of the most disturbing parts of the case, not because it changes the evidence, but because it shows how little Robert understood about what was waiting ahead. He may have believed the meeting would give them a chance to talk. He may have thought Chacey genuinely needed help. He may even have worn the familiar cologne as a reminder of a better period in their marriage. What he did not know was that Garza was positioned nearby with a shotgun. Robert entered the Jeep and sat behind the steering wheel. Garza moved close and fired. Chacey later claimed she shouted for him to stop just before the blast. Prosecutors challenged that statement. If she truly believed Garza was only going to speak with Robert, why did she know when to shout? Why was she expecting something that required an urgent warning? And why had a conversation required a loaded shotgun, a fake emergency, a remote road, and a plan to take Robert's vehicle? After the shooting, Chacey ran toward the main road and sought help. Her 911 call sounded frantic. The defense would later use that reaction to argue she had not expected Robert to die. But panic after a murder does not prove innocence before it. A person can discuss violence in the abstract and still react emotionally when a real human being is killed in front of them. The question was not whether Chacey was shocked by the sight. The question was whether she knowingly helped create it. Police arrested Chacey the morning after the murder. Investigators then moved to locate Michael Garza. A tactical team searched for him. He later surrendered and requested an attorney. At that point, the case contained a major weakness. The shotgun was missing. Chacey could accuse Garza. Garza could accuse Chacey. Without the weapon, Each person could claim the other was responsible. Then, approximately 5 weeks after the murder, a farmer was working in a field near the crime scene. He uncovered a shotgun. The weapon was found less than a quarter of a mile from the area where Robert was killed. It remained loaded, with a spent shell still inside and additional ammunition in the magazine. Investigators traced the shotgun to Michael Garza's brother. The physical evidence had now connected Garza's family to a weapon abandoned near the ambush location. And the shotgun was consistent with the type of weapon used to kill Robert. The field had preserved what the killers apparently believed the darkness would hide. But investigators were also reconstructing a second crime scene: Chacey's digital life. Her phone showed multiple relationships and repeated conversations about Robert. There was Michael Garza. There was Brad Golden, the man captured by the home security camera. There were other men who received messages about Chacey's marriage, custody fears, and desire to be free. Golden told investigators Chacey had claimed she was already divorced. He also said she described Robert as abusive. But when Chacey spoke about danger, Golden suggested involving police. He did not offer to kill Robert. Garza reacted differently. According to the prosecution, Chacey discovered that Garza was the man most likely to turn her words into action. There was another revealing detail. Garza appeared to believe Chacey was building a future with him. Yet on the day of Robert's murder, she was also communicating with another lover and making plans to see him. That allowed prosecutors to present a darker interpretation of the relationship. Garza was not necessarily the man Chacey intended to spend her life with. He was the man willing to do what the others would not. Investigators placed the messages beside Chacey, changing police statements. First, she did not know the shooter. Then she identified Garza. First, the Jeep was stuck. Then she admitted it was not. First, she had taken a wrong turn. Then she admitted Garza directed her to the road. First, the attack was random. Then she admitted there had been a plan to confront Robert. Later, the plan included a staged robbery, taking Robert's truck and burning it. Every new version moved closer to the evidence. And every new version appeared only after investigators exposed a problem with the previous one. Michael Garza went to trial first in July 2018. He pleaded not guilty and attempted to redirect suspicion toward Chacey. Garza claimed he had provided his brother's shotgun to Chacey because she said she needed protection. His defense suggested she may have been the person responsible for Robert's death. He also offered an alibi. Garza said he had been caring for a sick cow on his family's property at the time of the murder. The cow was named Oreo. The prosecution attacked the story using the broader evidence. Chacey had identified Garza as the shooter. The shotgun linked to his brother had been found near the crime scene. The messages showed his hostility toward Robert. And the circumstances of the ambush matched the plan investigators said Chacey and Garza had discussed. The jury rejected Garza's defense. On July 20, 2018, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to 99 years in prison. His conviction did not end the investigation into Chacey. Garza could not have brought Robert to the road alone. He did not have the trust required to make Robert approach without fear. Only Chacey could create the emergency. Only Chacey could guarantee Robert would respond. Only Chacey could stand beside him and make the situation appear ordinary until he sat inside the Jeep. Her trial began in June 2019. Prosecutors charged her with capital murder, arguing that financial benefit formed part of the plan. The defense did not need to prove Chacey was honest. By then, her lies were undeniable. Instead, the defense focused on intent. Her attorneys argued that affairs, deception, and terrible judgment did not automatically prove murder. Chacey may have arranged a confrontation. She may have helped Garza frighten Robert, but according to the defense, Garza made the independent decision to fire. They pointed to the 911 call. They highlighted her emotional behavior after the shooting. They argued that someone expecting a planned execution would not immediately draw police attention to the scene. The prosecution responded with Chacey's own words. Jurors watched the recorded police interviews. They saw her move from one account to another. They heard her admit that the Jeep was not stuck. They heard her identify Garza. They heard her acknowledge that he had discussed killing Robert. They learned she had seen weapons before the trip. They heard about a plan to make the killing resemble a robbery. They examined the messages saying Robert needed to be gone. And they considered the sequence of deliberate actions required to place him in front of the shotgun. Chacey picked Garza up. She drove toward the isolated area. She followed his directions. She allowed him to leave the vehicle with a weapon. She continued down the road. She contacted Robert. She lied about being stuck. She waited for him to arrive. She walked with him toward the Jeep. Then she watched as he entered the precise position required for the ambush. Under Texas law, a person does not have to pull the trigger to be responsible for murder. Someone who intentionally assists, encourages, or helps arrange the offense can be held legally responsible for the result. The prosecution summarized the case through a simple reality. Garza had the gun. Chacey delivered the victim. After approximately 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Chacey Poynter was found not guilty of capital murder, but she was found guilty of murder. This distinction is often reported incorrectly. She was not convicted of capital murder. The jury rejected the higher charge, but concluded that the evidence still proved she was legally responsible for Robert's killing. Chacey was sentenced to life in prison and fined $10,000. She would become eligible for parole consideration after serving 30 years. Eligibility does not guarantee release. It only means a parole board may evaluate her case after the required period. Robert's approximately $680,000 life insurance benefit did not go to Chacey. The money was ultimately divided among his 3 daughters. Chacey continued insisting that Robert was not supposed to die. But the case did not end with the jury's verdict. Her attorneys appealed. They argued that statements from her interrogation should have been suppressed because Detective Burke did not personally repeat the complete Miranda warnings at the police station. Sergeant Meek had already read Chacey her rights at the crime scene. She confirmed that she understood them. Detective Burke began the later interrogation less than 3 hours afterward. He verified that Meek had given the warnings before continuing. The appellate court ruled that the questioning at the station was a continuation of the same investigation and that the earlier warnings remained effective. Her written statements also contained the required warnings, which she acknowledged. The defense raised another issue. Chacey's attorneys argued the jury should have been given the option of manslaughter. That would have allowed jurors to consider whether she acted recklessly rather than intentionally or knowingly. The appeals court rejected that argument. It focused on what Chacey knew before Robert arrived. She knew Garza had violent tendencies. She knew he had discussed killing Robert. She saw weapons being prepared. She accompanied him while he was armed. She helped bring him near the murder scene. She followed the plan. And she lured Robert to the deserted road. The court concluded there was not even a minimal amount of evidence showing she was guilty only of reckless behavior. Her conviction was affirmed on May 24, 2021. Garza also appealed his conviction. His appeal concerned a detective's trial testimony stating that Chacey had said Garza killed Robert. The trial court instructed the jury to disregard the statement, and Garza's request for a mistrial was denied. The appellate court affirmed his conviction in July 2020. By then, both people connected to the ambush had received severe prison sentences. Garza would serve 99 years. Chacey would serve life, with parole eligibility after 30 years. The legal system had reached its conclusion. Robert's family was left with the consequences. 5 days after Chacey's arrest, firefighters gathered to honor Robert Poynter. His death was especially difficult for the people who had served beside him, because he had spent his career responding to danger and helping strangers survive emergencies. Yet the call that ended his life was not sent through a fire department radio. It came from his wife. She knew he would respond. That is what made the plan possible. Robert's willingness to help was not an incidental detail. It was the central mechanism of the crime. Had a stranger called him from an unknown number and asked him to enter a dark farm road, he might have refused. Had Garza approached him directly, Robert would have known something was wrong. But Chacey did not need to overpower him. She only needed to sound stranded. The evidence against her was not based on one perfect confession or one eyewitness who saw the entire plan being created. It was built from accumulation. The false emergency, the remote location, the armed lover, the messages, the changing statements, the recovered shotgun, the insurance policy, the failing marriage, the custody fears, and the repeated desire for Robert to be gone. Each piece answered one question and created another. Why was the Jeep on that road? Because Chacey drove it there. Why did Robert come? Because she called him. Why was Garza nearby? Because he traveled with her. Why did Chacey initially describe a stranger? Because identifying Garza would expose her own connection to the attack. Why did her story keep changing? Because the evidence kept removing the places where she could hide. Chacey's final position was that she had expected violence, but not death. The jury heard that argument. The appeals court examined it. Neither accepted it. The law did not require proof that Chacey held the shotgun. It required proof that she knowingly participated in the murder. And the most damaging part of the case was that Robert could not have been placed in front of the weapon without her. On September 9, 2016, Robert Poynter believed he was answering a simple request for help. His wife's Jeep was supposedly trapped in the mud. He drove into the countryside, left his own vehicle, and walked toward her through the darkness. The Jeep was waiting. So was Michael Garza. Robert climbed into the driver's seat. Seconds later, the shotgun fired. The case began with Chacey trying to convince police that a mysterious man had appeared from nowhere. But he had not appeared from nowhere. He had been brought there. And so had Robert. One man carried the weapon. One woman created the opportunity. The dirt road hid the ambush for only a few hours. Her phone revealed the rest. If this case kept you watching until the end, subscribe now. We're building a complete library of deeply researched true crime stories, and the next case may be even more disturbing than this one. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it.